Okay, so if you open the XML servlet, you can see that there are two methods here. One is the doGet and the doPost. We touched upon this a bit in our earlier tutorial, but we'll just repeat some of the things here. A doGet is called when a get method is issued to the servlet, and the doPost is called when the post method is issued to the servlet. So get and post methods are standard HTTP methods as per the protocol, and each method has a particular function. It's usually recommended to use a get method when you are actually getting something from the application. So you want to get some data, that's when you would use the get method. And of course you would pass parameters depending on what kind of data you want to get, and you get the related data based on the parameters that you pass. The post method, on the other hand, is used when you want to post something, you want to submit something to the server, and the application has to later do some kind of a write operation depending on the data that you have posted. Say for example you want to create a new user in your user application, or you want to initiate some action that causes a change in the data, say an edit or a delete or something like that. That's when you want to use a post method. So the understanding is that when you're using a post method, it causes the application to make some changes to the data. So this is how it's recommended to use the get and post methods. Now the question is, what if I use a get method to write some data, or use a post method to just retrieve data? So I'll tell you what happens there. So let me just run this project. We've already deployed it. Okay, so here's our simple form. What I'll do is I'll try this on a browser. Okay, so we have this form, and let's check whether it's using a get or post. Okay, it's using a post. Let me use a get first. Okay, so I'll just type in some test values and say submit. So you can see that the values that I've submitted have come here as query parameters. We have already discussed this. Now what happens if I do a refresh? The servlet is called every time, and it performs that doGet action. It calls this doGet method, and it returns values. So the assumption here is that you're using this method to get some values from the database. Of course, I'm not doing that here, but you would use a doGet method only when you're getting values from the database. So no matter how many times you do a refresh, it would go execute this doGet and pull the data from the database and display it here. Now let me change this HTML to a post. I'm actually changing the form method to a post. Okay, it refreshes that. Okay, now the HTML is changed. I'm going to call the same, I'm going to pass the same test values. I'm going to do a submit. So it's going to call the post method. No difference here. There is this do post that's called, and then it executes this, and the output is over here. Now notice what happens when I do a refresh here. The browser tells me that the page you're looking for used information that you entered. Returning to the page may cause any action you took to be repeated. Do you want to continue? So it's telling me that if I do a refresh, it's going to call the action again. The same action is going to get executed again. So I can do a continue or I can do a cancel. If I do a continue, it's the same. It's going to call the same post method and it's going to execute the same thing, just like it has for a do get. But only if it's a post method, the browser asks me for this confirmation. Now, why does a browser ask me for confirmation only for the post and not for the get? The reason is, again, as I said, it's because of the protocol. When you are an application developer and you're using these methods, you would use a post method only when you want some kind of a data change to happen, and you would use a get method only when you want to get data. So there is no harm if you repeat a get operation, but there could be some consequences if you repeat a post operation which you don't want to. So because of this protocol and because of this understanding that all applications would do a post only when a data submit or a data write operation is happening, the browser wants me, okay? The browser says, okay, I'm not only rendering this value here when you press a refresh, I am actually submitting the, the form contents to the post operation. Now, it is normal understanding that an application would do a write operation on a post submission. So it asks me, are you sure you want to do this? It might cause a write operation to happen in the backend, and that might not be what you intended. So again, there is no rule, but there is this understanding that this is how the protocol works, and that's the reason why the browser also asks me. So you have, that's one advantage. If you use a post for a write operation, you can be assured that whatever browser that the user is using, when they do a resubmission or a retrigger, the browser gives them an alert. So the user might want to reconsider doing that submission again, say in case the user is making a credit card payment and they do a refresh. You don't have to, the browser does warn them, so that's one extra layer of protection that you have, for the user submitting twice. Of course, you cannot just rely on that. The user might go ahead and do a submit anyway. So there are other ways of tackling that, which we'll discuss later. But so this is the main difference why you would want to choose a do get versus a do post. We also discussed a couple of other differences. One is that a get method has the parameters in the URL itself, whereas in the post method the parameters do not show up in the URL. So let's say you are submitting a login page, and if the login page uses a get method, then that would mean that your password, it ends up showing over here, so which is something that you don't want. So in that case, the post is an obvious choice. And of course, if you have too many parameters, then this ends up getting really lengthy. So in this case, we have only so many values here. If I do a get, just some junk values that I'm typing here. If I do a get, you can see that URL becomes big, because all these parameters are going to end up over here. And if you're the submission, say I type a really big text here, the whole text is going to come up in the get. So that's something that you might want to avoid as well, and the option is you can go for a post. But the basic difference is the nature of the operation. If you're getting data, you use a get, and if you're posting data, you do a post. It's as simple as that. Okay, there are some other methods that you can use as well, depending on your requirement, because those are the methods that the HTTP protocol supports, apart from a do get and a do post. So in order to do that, we will have a look at this HTTP servlet. This is a class that we override when we write our servlet. Now we'll see why we need to override this. The best way to actually understand that is to have a look at the source code itself. So HTTP servlet is a part of the Java specification. There there are some rules that this HTTP servlet class has to follow. There are some methods that has to be implemented by the servlet, and this has been given as the Java specification. Now, any application server that you use, be it Tomcat or Glassfish or JBoss, it has to have its own implementation of this HTTP servlet specification. And what we're doing here is we are actually extending a class which Tomcat has implemented. So we'll have a look at what Tomcat has, how Tomcat has actually implemented this servlet. So if I open the definition here, it says that I don't have the Tomcat source. So let's download the Tomcat. I have Tomcat 7, so I'll download the source Tomcat 7. You can see here are the source code distributions. We'll just download the zip. Now we'll have to extract this in a folder. I will create a folder called source, and I'll extract it here. Okay, now I can attach that source here. I'll say that source, external folder, Java source. I'll attach the main directory so that any other source files that I add can go into this folder. And I'll say okay. Okay, now there you go. Eclipse has found this particular class and it has opened that up. So as I said, HTTP servlet class this is the code in Tomcat itself. When you download Tomcat, you actually are downloading an implementation of this class. So as you can see here, there are some methods that this HTTP servlet implements. You see this? You have a do get, you have a do post. These are the two that we have already seen. In addition to that, you have a do head, do put, do delete, do trace. These are other HTTP methods that you can use, and these are the ones that Tomcat has to support as well because it has to adhere to the servlet specifications. Now let's have a look at the do get. So what does a do get do? It tries to get the protocol. This is the HTTP protocol. So depending on whether it's a HTTP 1.1 or not, it sends out a different error message. It says, it does a send error, method not allowed, or a bad request. So what this means is this XML servlet is actually extending the HTTP servlet, the class that we saw here. So when a do get of this XML servlet is called, our method gets executed. Now what happens if I had not written this method and I called a do get for this XML servlet? That's when this code gets executed and a method not allowed or a bad request error message is logged. So you need to implement these methods depending on how you use it. So again, it's the same thing for a do post as well. So in case I had not implemented this do post, in case I had not written this code and I had called a do post method of this XML servlet, then by default the HTTP servlet's do post would have executed, and there would have been a corresponding error message for that also. Yeah, as you can see here, there's a not implemented error message. So that's all that Tomcat does. Tomcat says, hey, I'm going to give you this signature, which is a do get and a do post. You implement it in your servlet. If by chance you don't implement it in your servlet and I get a request, then I'm going to execute this method and I'm going to return a error message.